Hey guys, it's Karina here with a new video. It's been a while since I last posted, and today I want to do a life update video. So I essentially want to go over a bit about how the last year of life has been. So the year of me being 24 and now welcoming my 25-ness. Yep. So I've got some notes, and essentially I want to go over a bit about my mental health journey over the last year. I want to share with you guys how I've moved from Ottawa to Guelph and how I've managed to make new friends, and a bit about queerness and gender, and maybe a bit about polyamory too. Yeah, and at the end, I will do a room tour for y'all. So, very exciting. So yeah, I have had an eventful last year because this past year I had a lot of mental health difficulties. I last summer went hypomanic because I was on antidepressants, and I had increased my antidepressants as I had been struggling with my mental health, and by increasing my antidepressants, it actually sent me into a hypomanic episode. And I was probably hypomanic for about like 3 months before my family clued in and started to realize that that I didn't see myself. So after that point, I ended up coming home and I went to the hospital, and I was officially diagnosed with bipolar 2. So there's three types of bipolars. There's bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and cyclothymia, which is kind of a blend of both. So essentially, bipolar 1, you experience mania and depression, and you've had to have a psychotic episode to be diagnosed with bipolar 1. And you actually don't need to have had a depression to be diagnosed with bipolar 1, which is quite interesting. And both my siblings have bipolar 1, and I find that each of us have had such a different experience. So I have bipolar 2, which means I experience hypomania and depression. And then bipolar 3 is like cyclothymia, is a kind of a, essentially you're like rapid cycling and sometimes going in and out of depression and hypomania. So you'll be like maybe hypomanic for a few days and then depressed for a few days. And there's like a bit of a cycle to it. I also may not be explaining these things perfectly. Definitely consult the internet if you want to know more about the different types of bipolar and how they are similar and, again, also different. So after being diagnosed, I was in a quite interesting predicament because I had started my 5th year of university and I was planning on graduating this past year, which I did in fact graduate. We will get to that in a minute. So essentially, I had originally signed up to do an honors bachelor for my university degree, but in the end I just finished with a regular bachelor, which is right up there. And I finished with a Bachelor of Sociology and a minor in Indigenous Studies. So essentially I wasn't able to complete the honors piece. Essentially the honors piece requires a couple extra credits, and it also requires you to write a thesis, which I was planning on doing, but because of my mental health I had to drop that. Essentially I was having a full course load this past September, and then after I came home and got diagnosed with bipolar, I dropped some of my classes and just ended up finishing 2 of my classes that semester. And then going into the winter, I had a full course load, and I unfortunately ended up dropping out because this winter was one of the hardest depressions I've ever been through. I, was really depressed after getting diagnosed with bipolar. I don't think I fully processed the news, and bipolar is definitely like the thing I thought I would never get because I had grown up in a family surrounded by bipolar, and I kind of just assumed that I was the normal child and that wouldn't be like my experience. So when it happened, it was quite a shock, and I don't even think I knew how to process it. And After going hypomanic for a period of time, there's often a depression that follows. And since I was hypomanic for so long, I think the depression as a result was a lot heavier. But not only that, it was my first time going on medication for my bipolar. So it took a while before I could be at a dose that was effective in terms of stabilizing my mood. So that was like quite a journey in itself. And yeah, this winter essentially I like was just really down. I felt like there was a weight or a block, a mental block in my brain, and it was stopping me from experiencing joy in a lot of ways. Um, Essentially, I started winter semester with a full course load, and then course by course, I dropped. And I remember going to see one of the teachers I really look up to, and they said to me, like, your mental health matters more than school. So, like, if you need to stop, that's what you need to do, right? So, that was when I kind of realized, like, okay, I don't have to do this if I don't want to, and maybe it's not the best timing for it. So, I let everything go, and I was still working with the government, but essentially they, I think, recognized I was going through a really hard time, so as a result they gave me very little to work on, and I mainly used this past winter just to like work on myself and move through this depression. I was originally in counseling at the beginning of the winter, and I stopped one-on-one therapy just because I felt like I couldn't talk about whatever was going on in my head. It just felt too, like, I just felt too stagnant, and I felt too mentally blocked to even like explain what I was feeling, and I was just too numb to have therapy be effective. So that was like really challenging to let that go. But over the winter, I did a DBT group, which stands for Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. And this was really helpful. While I was doing it, I definitely thought it was really stupid and not helpful. I would go every week, and every week they would ask you, how are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? And I would always say 5 because I wasn't feeling like terrible, but I also wasn't feeling like great. So and I just felt like I saw very little improvement over time. But in terms of the group, like, we learned a lot of skills in terms of like how to handle conflict with people, and we talked about like skills called Dear Man, which is a skill that you can use to like give people feedback. And I'm trying to remember what else we learned. We learned compassionate, what was it called? Can I remember? Compassion. Something. Radical acceptance. Radical acceptance. Yes, we learned about that, which was a pretty helpful skill. Radical acceptance is like acknowledging it's raining today, and I could be sad because it's raining, but instead I'm going to dance in the rain and embrace the rain. So that's what radical acceptance is. And there's a lot of different DBT skills in terms of like shifting your mindset and kind of seeing things in a different way. I would highly recommend to check out DBT resources or join a DBT support group like I did. I found mine through my university, and I did find it helpful. What I found really helpful about it at the time was, like, since I was so depressed and didn't feel like I could talk to people about what was going on in my head, it was nice just to go to a group where I could be around people who were also feeling the same way I was feeling, but also I didn't have to talk if I didn't want to. So it was kind of perfect for me in that way. So yeah. And then in terms of like the winter and the things I did and spent my time doing was I got into a routine of swimming, which was really great. And I also worked on puzzles and watched comfort shows like Gilmore Girls and Heartstopper. And I would see friends still. And what else did I write down here? Music really helped me. I did a meditation routine while I was depressed that was quite intensive, actually. I would meditate for an hour every day, and it was doing a mantra meditation, so it was quite intense. but I think it did keep me regulated in some ways. I have since April, I decided to let go of that practice just because it started to feel like a lot to meditate for a full hour every day. And now I still meditate, but I do it in smaller doses, which I find works better for me. And I don't know, I prefer guided meditations over mantra meditations, I find. So, but yeah, those were some of the things that got me through this winter. I honestly, the best way to explain the depression I was feeling was just a lot of resistance. I felt like I was having to drag myself to do anything, and I just didn't want to do anything. But I did a pretty good job at still getting myself out of the house and exercising and doing yoga and swimming and rock climbing too. So, and I kind of just started to stick with the same friends. I just spent time with friends who I felt comfortable with enough that I didn't have to perform too much or feel like I had to be on. I felt really socially awkward this past winter when I was depressed. I feel like I didn't have anything to talk about, and I felt like I had to ask people get to know you questions because I couldn't think of any of my own questions. And it was really challenging because I'm someone who's super extroverted, and normally conversations aren't a challenge for me, but I definitely felt that way this winter. Um, and honestly, I think the best way to cope with it sometimes is just be it's okay to have quiet between you and a friend. And if that friend's a really good friend, they're gonna be okay with you showing up however you show up, right? And I think I needed to know it was okay just to be the way I was, even though I wasn't myself. So, and during the whole winter, I just didn't feel like doing things was helping. But now that I'm out of the depression, I do feel like going out, moving my body, those things definitely did really help me get out of my depression. And then one thing that was pretty hard all winter too is I was really anxious about moving back to Guelph. I mainly moved back to Guelph because I my lease was ending with my apartment, and unfortunately my government job let me go because of budget cuts. So because of those two big things, it kind of just made sense to come home. I honestly couldn't financially stay in Ottawa, and I didn't have a job lined up, so it made sense to go home. But even though it made sense to go home all winter, I was just really hesitant to move back home, and I just really wasn't sure what my life was going to look like moving back to Guelph. And I was just so devastated at the thought of leaving Ottawa and all the friends and all the amazingness that Ottawa is as a city. So I was really nervous to move back, and I moved back in April, and it was tough because I was still pretty depressed. And then I would say in May and June, I was slowly coming out of the depression, and I started to feel more myself again. And over the spring, I did a job working with a place called Community Living. So I was working with special needs adults, and that job was really interesting. I really enjoyed working with the special needs adults, but the only thing that was kind of challenging about that job was the shifting was really inconsistent. And then on top of that, they weren't overly accommodating to my mental health condition. They had a policy where you had to work night shifts if the night shift person didn't show up. And I wasn't really given an accommodation. They just kind of told me I would have to negotiate with whoever else was on shift, so that I wouldn't have to work a night shift. So that to me wasn't really a great accommodation, and there was a few things about the job that just weren't working for me. So I left that job, and then this past summer I worked at Shalom Counseling Services with my mom, and it was a really excellent opportunity. I got to do admin work and promote their annual fall fundraiser, 10,000 Steps for Mental Health. So that was such an amazing opportunity. I had such a great time this summer working with my mom and getting to know her coworkers. So yeah, that was really cool. And now I'm kind of in a phase of unemployment / I actually did just accept a job at a grocery store. So things have been quite all over the place since leaving Ottawa. I did graduate in June, and that was really exciting. I finished with high distinction. And going to my graduation ceremony was such an honor. Yeah, in some ways, grads are like not like whatever. What am I trying to say? They're like not overly interesting, but it is a moment where you get to like walk across the stage and say, I did that, right? So it did feel like quite a moment of honor, even though the ceremony itself was definitely a little bit boring. But I got to see some of my profs and friends, so that was really lovely. And I got to celebrate with my family and friends after the ceremony as well. So it was a really fun trip. And yeah, what else was I gonna say? Oh yeah, coming back to the mental health journey, I over the last year reflecting and stuff, I feel like I maybe had undiagnosed bipolar for a while. I recently started with a new psychiatrist, and she said that on average, people with bipolar 2 can go up to 13 years without being diagnosed. So it's kind of crazy. Like, bipolar 2 is a lot more subtle than bipolar 1, so often it can go undiagnosed. So yeah, that was kind of crazy to find out. And like, I feel like I can think about the last 5 years of my life, and I feel like it kind of started after I did my mission programs in high school. So specifically the one I went to after high school, the one I went to YWAM, where I went to Hawaii in the Philippines. I feel like that experience potentially brewed my bipolar. Like, I think that trip I was maybe not the most well, and also during that whole program, like, I wasn't necessarily getting good sleep, and not getting good sleep can also trigger mental unwellness. And I can also look at the last 5 years and see times where I might have been rapid cycling, which is like essentially when you're kind of going in and out of depression and hypomania. I can kind of see like at least once per year in university that was happening to me. And during those times I was just really impulsive, and then I would like have this period of hypomania, and then all of a sudden I was depressed, and it just didn't make sense. And all through university I had like this fear of burning out and like worrying that I was burning out. And I think that was really linked to the mood instability I was experiencing. So yeah, I think that was a lot. It's been a lot to process, like what was me and what wasn't me in the last 5 years. But I don't know, I think that's a challenge with bipolar in general, is trying to, or just mental illness in general, trying to figure out what's you and what's not you. And I don't know if I really have an answer for what is you and what isn't you, to be honest. I think we just are who we are, and like, whether you have mental illness or not, there's moments where we do things that are stupid or not in line with who we are as people, and we can't let those moments define us, I think. But yeah, coming back to the mental health piece and my journey, I like went through this terrible depression, and then I finally got through it, and it was honestly such a big deal that I made it through. Like, I'm so proud of myself for getting through that really hard time. I feel like it's given me a whole new perspective on life, and I'm just like, whoa, I got through that. And like, now when I have bad days, I'm like, but I've been through worse, so I'm gonna get through today, you know? So as much as depression sucks, I do feel like sometimes it puts things into perspective. And yeah, so after being depressed this past winter and then coming out of it in the spring, I then went into a hypomanic episode. So that was a bit unexpected. I think that like bipolar can definitely be somewhat seasonal. So it was last summer that I went hypomanic too. So I think something about summer, something's in the air. Anyway, so I started to go up, and I was able to catch it in pretty good time. Like, I would say within 3 weeks, I like kind of knew something was off. So yeah, that was a lot. And this most recent hypo episode, like, it just felt like I was making all these realizations about my trauma and how things have hurt me in the last year. And it was the first time I was really like accepting and understanding my bipolar and like acknowledging that this is something now that's a part of me. And during that time, I really realized that I hadn't processed the fact that I had been diagnosed with bipolar. And since then, I've like started therapy and I started seeing a new psychiatrist. And I realized that like there's so much I have to learn about my own illness and how it shows up. And some things that I'm now taking time to learn is like, what are my early warning signs for hypomania? What are my early warning signs for depression, and how can I prevent these things? And when I'm experiencing these symptoms, what can I do to mitigate them, right? So it's been a whole journey, and it's been scary to kind of like accept this part of me. And bipolar is a really hard illness to deal with. It's hard to not be in control completely of the things that you're doing. But yeah, I don't know. As hard as it is to handle this illness, in some ways it is really beautiful too. So I was always saying, even though mental illness may suck sometimes, there are beautiful moments to being bipolar. Like, depression obviously is really hard, and hypomania, although you're out of control, it is kind of a fun experience in the sense that you're kind of the life of the party. You're having a blast. You're just having a good time and you're not second guessing anything. So it's kind of fun, but also I think that it's definitely not a state that you want to stay in. And I think that like my bipolar definitely can elevate my creativity sometimes. I wouldn't say I'm creative because I'm bipolar, but I definitely think it's kind of cool to get into those creative flows when you're hypomanic. So there are some like pros and cons to being bipolar, but it's also a really challenging illness to deal with. Yeah, so let's see what's next on my list here. Yeah, so in terms of like moving back to Guelph, I kind of did have to like make new friends and make new connections. A lot of people really envy the way that I like make friends and new connections, and my like top tactic when I like am trying to meet new people is I'll go to a cool event. I'm all about finding cool queer events or just fun things that are happening in the city. And I love to find markets too, whether it's to attend or sell my art at. And yeah, I love to like try to meet new people, and kind of my tactic for that is just to like see who I gravitate towards at an event. And then after having some conversation with someone, I'll just like be bold and ask if they want to go for coffee and get their phone number. And that has worked for me in university, and it's worked for me since moving back, and I've been able to make new connections. And so yeah, after going hypomanic this summer, I did take some time off work, and then I was able to get myself back on track. The biggest things that kind of helped me while I was hypomanic was to really understimulate myself and like try to leave the house very little and just focus on routine and slowing down. And yeah, that really helped to take some time off work and like focus on being still and trying to come down from all the things I was feeling. And then what's really hard about coming out of a hypomanic episode is like, since you're in overdrive for a period of time, it's like you're just so tired afterwards. So I was really like struggling for a couple weeks in terms of energy levels. And in some ways, I'd say I'm still recovering right now. I've definitely been experiencing some depressive symptoms, but I've been doing my best to mitigate them by just moving, doing exercise, reading. Sometimes I give in a little bit and I'll have a TV day, and that's okay. I find getting out of the house and talking to people always really helps, and my friends have been really supportive. So yeah, that's been really great. And then yeah, in terms of like moving back to Guelph, like I've been able to make new connections and new friends, and that's been really exciting. My best tactic for making friends is to like find cool events to go to. I mainly find cool events through Instagram. I find once you follow like one queer page and all these other like event pages will come up that are queer related, or if you're not queer, just like follow one event page and more will come into your feed. So I've met new friends through that. And like kind of my tactic is when I'm like at an event, I will kind of like see who I gravitate towards, start some conversation with them, and then if the conversation's going well, I'll ask them if they want to like go for coffee and ask for their number. And yeah, I find this tactic works for me, and a lot of people in my life envy that I'm like so bold and like an initiator. So I think it's a great way to make friends and new connections. Yeah, some like fun moments this summer was excuse me. Some fun moments this summer was going camping with my two high school best friends, Shannon and Lucy. We had such a great time. We went to Bon Echo and we got so swarmed by mosquitoes. And it was one of the hottest weekends of the summer. And yeah, we died in some ways, but we also made the trip really fun and did our best to make the most of the bugs and the heat. At one point we were watching the sunset, and as it got dark, the mosquitoes came out and they started like attacking us. So I just have this core memory of us like being attacked by mosquitoes and then like running into the tent, and then we're all like super hot, and I happen to have like this fan, so then we were like blowing the fan on all of us, and we're just like dying of laughter and trying not to get eaten alive. So it was pretty funny. My other highlight this summer was going camping with my close friends Angela, Amber, and Lauren, and Angela's kids. Angela is my youth leader from church, and yeah, we all went camping together, and it was so much fun. We went to Lake Huron and had a blast. I definitely wasn't super well that weekend, but I'm still glad that I went. So yeah, I definitely went on that camping trip thinking like, oh, I'm fine, like I think this episode's almost over. And then I like went on the camping trip, and by the end of the camping trip, I just realized I was so not well. And I think being around people who cared about me so much like made me realize I wasn't well. So it was still a really great experience, and I really loved hanging out with Angela's kids, and I just love children in general. Oh, also, I read this book called Trust Kids, which I highly would recommend. I might even do a whole video on Trust Kids because it's just such a great book. But essentially, in short, the premise is confronting what is called adult supremacy. So it's talking about how adults overrule children and how we don't listen to children, and how children's voices are so important and children have so much wisdom about the world. And yeah, one cool thing it talks about too is how like our childhoods are never over. Like childhood is a part of us, and like it kind of like challenges this idea of adulthood. Like why are we all of a sudden an adult when we reach 18, you know? We're never letting go of our children and our childhood selves. Like I'm still a child at heart, hence this unicorn. So yeah, it's just so important to stay in touch with that. But this book is really cool because it talks about those things, and it talks about what's called free schools, which is like an alternative school where kids get more freedom to learn and structure. They get more freedom of how they want to structure their days. So anyways, it's a really great book, and what's cool is each chapter is written by different people. So it's quite a cool collection of art, really. So yeah, anyways, I'd recommend that book. Where was I in my notebook? So let's see. Oh yeah, I was talking about some highlights of the summer. But yeah, okay, two things I want to like segue into is my faith and my queerness, and where those two things are at. So one thing that's been cool since moving home is I started going back to church. While I was in university, I didn't go to church really at all. At one point, me and my sister did go to a handful of different churches, and we went to a Unitarian a few times in a row. So that was really cool, but we didn't really stay consistent anywhere. And honestly, most of the time I was in university, it was COVID anyways, so it wasn't really the greatest time to get involved in a church community. But since moving home, I got involved with Royal City Mission. And Rose City Mission is a really lovely church. Both me and my siblings go there, and it's just a very progressive church. One of my favorite things about the church is after the sermon, our pastor opens the mic to people in the congregation to share their thoughts about the sermon, which I think is really beautiful, because then it's like taking a moment to say, like, that it's not just the pastor's voice that matters, but it's everybody's voice that matters. So it's taking that hierarchy out of the game. So I think I really appreciate that. And I think something that's really interesting for me is I, growing up, like, so strongly believed in God and the Bible, and as time has gone on, I've deconstructed different aspects of my faith, and I've come to learn that the Bible cannot be taken so literally, and that it is an ancient piece of work that still has value, but needs to have more care and consideration in interpreting it at times. And I don't know, I think the thing I've most come to terms with lately is I feel like for me, religion more than anything is like a way of living. I don't think that my faith is one thing. I think my faith is in people and in love and in nature and the things that feel pure in this world. So I don't know, my faith isn't a black and white thing, and I can't really say it's God either. I think God is not necessarily a thing. I think God may be many things. Like, I think God is just those happy moments. It's love, it's mutual aid, it's caring for your neighbor, it's trying to be a good person and trying to be your highest self. And yeah, I don't know. That's the way I've been looking at it recently, and I think sometimes church can be a triggering space for me because I grew up in that space, and I feel like I've also went through a journey where I realized there's a lot of harmful things about the church, and I do find like worship music to be a bit triggering sometimes, in the sense of like worship music is sometimes saying like we need to die to ourselves and give our all to Jesus, and that I have a bit of a problem with, because I don't think that we should ever die to ourselves. I think that there's so much goodness in us and we need to trust ourselves. Like, I think that the whole concept of like that we're sinners and need to be saved is somewhat problematic. Like, I don't think that I'm sinful. Like, I'm not trying to sin, and I do make mistakes, but I wouldn't define myself as sinful. And I think by defining yourself as that, you're kind of saying that humans are inherently bad. I think humans are inherently good. We make mistakes, but we're always trying to be better, is my personal opinion. And I think that blah blah blah. I think as humans, we're inherently good and we're always striving to be better. We're still making mistakes along the ways, but we want to be good. And sometimes people get lost, and maybe that's not always people's intentions, but I think that there is inherent goodness within all of us and love. And yeah, I think that the biggest thing I've learned is just to take from church what you want to take from it. And whatever you don't want to take from it, leave it at the front door. And yeah, I don't know. I think there's something still really beautiful about being a Christian, and I think sometimes people are really confused that I'm like queer, but I'm also a Christian, and aren't sure how those two things can go hand in hand. But I definitely think if we see queerness as a verb, which queerness as a verb is just saying that like it's okay to be different, I think queerness and faith can definitely go really hand in hand then, if we queer our faith. And I think the way that I queer my faith is by not practicing my faith in a traditional way. In terms of like my queerness and where things are at with that, I definitely still am very queer. I honestly feel like queerness is a way of life. Like, being queer means that I'm always questioning how I show up in relationships and what relationships mean to me. What does romance mean? What does attraction mean? And I think, yeah, acknowledging that I'm queer is acknowledging the journey of figuring out what these things mean to me. And something so important that a professor once told me was, in life, you get to build your relationships in whichever way that you want to, and nobody gets to judge that or tell you what to do. And I'm definitely still in a phase of figuring out what I want for the future. I practice polyamory, and that's something that still resonates with me. But it's also hard to practice polyamory, and it's also I wouldn't say I'm in a place where I like have exactly what I'm looking for, but I also think that like love comes in and out of our lives, and we're never gonna have our relationships look exactly how we want to. There was this quote that came up on my calendar. I have like a little quote calendar, and the quote was, "Nothing lasts forever." And it's true. Like, we want love to last forever, and sometimes it doesn't. And we're not even here on this earth forever. So everything is temporary. But it's temporary, but it's not, in the sense that like I do truly believe my essence will somehow always be on this earth. But I think the temporality is the fact that I don't have control over it, though. Whatever my essence is, it might be evolving, it might be changing, and it's just out there, you know? So I think the beauty of love and relationships, and whether it's romantic relationships, friendships, whatever, it's just always evolving, changing, growing, and you're always defining it. You're always figuring out, what do these connections mean to me? And I think that's the beauty of queerness, or just relationships in general, is you're figuring out what it means to you. And yeah, one thing that's been cool recently too is I started an exploratory gender group through the Queer Library in Guelph. And this has been such an awesome opportunity to explore my gender and deconstruct gender and think about what gender even means to me. I truly do believe gender is a construct. But it's interesting to think about, like, what would the world be like if we didn't have the gender binary? Would we still have non-binary and trans people? What would our world look like, you know? I think language is so pivotal. Like, one thing that's interesting is, the other week ago at my gender exploratory group, we had a little lecture on queer history, and like, just even 50 years ago, the language for queerness was so different than it is now. And like, I definitely wonder sometimes, like, if I was born in a different era or just in a different country, like, would I have ever put together that I'm queer if I didn't have the language for it? And it's just so interesting to think about. And then it's interesting to think about, yeah, if we didn't have the gender binary, like, would there be all these words for how we understand ourselves, you know? And that just got me thinking in general. I think we as people were always looking for language and categories and ways of understanding. And I think the most important thing to acknowledge is that a label can never fully encompass who you are. And I think the beauty of, like, I do identify as non-binary, and I also do still identify as a woman, and that might change at some point in time, but by acknowledging I'm non-binary is like acknowledging that I'm not in the binary, but I'm also more than the binary. That, like, my gender is just everything and nothing at the same time. It's whatever it wants to be. And I think that's the beauty of the fluidity of it. Um, there's this YouTube video called What is a Woman? And I'll link it down below. It was really good. It was talking about, like, yeah, what is a woman, and what is a woman is like asking what is God. And I think that's also like asking what is God is like asking what is gender. You know, like, we don't really know what these things mean, and I think it's just about finding like out what resonates with you. And that was kind of the message of this video called What is the Woman, or What is a Woman. And I think that's, again, yeah, all that matters. I think it's all about like the journey you want to go under and figure out. And it's all just about like what sits with you well, and what do you want to identify as. I think it can be as simple as that. There's not a specific criteria for all these different types of genders. It's whatever fits you. And at the same time, like, you also just don't need to know, and you don't need to put a label on it if you don't want to. So that's kind of where my queerness is at. I'm enjoying just living life and seeing where life takes me, and honestly, I think the best thing you can do when it comes to trying to be open to love and relationships is just go to events and meet people and just see where life takes you. Yeah. Oh, and then one other thing I wanted to talk about too was bipolar, as I've been talking about earlier. So yeah, one other thing I wanted to add on to the types of bipolar is how bipolar actually works. There's a podcast about bipolar, and I will link it down below, but essentially it talks about how people get diagnosed with bipolar and just mental illness in general. And one thing it explains is that we all have genetic vulnerability to contract any mental illness. And then what plays a huge factor into us actually getting diagnosed with mental illness is our experiences and our trauma. So I think this is really interesting to think about when we think about mental illness. Like, there's no bipolar gene. We can contract bipolar through our genetic vulnerability and our experiences, and when our experiences tip us over, that's when diagnosis happens. And I don't know, I find this really fascinating and definitely something I would like to study more. I have an idea to write like a paper on the sociology of bipolar, because I think that would be really interesting to think about why people are diagnosed with bipolar and what might be the similar strands of trauma that like trigger this particular illness. So that's something I've been thinking about, and in general, just watching that video helped me understand how I got to this place. And I think sometimes we can think mental illness is like our fault, or like there was a particular thing that happened that made it a thing, but watching this podcast and listening to it really helped me understand that there's not one thing that makes you contract a mental illness. It's a lot of different things, and it's really out of your control. And I think that's, connects back to the point of this video in the sense that, like, we can't control anything in life, and all we can do is just be in love and be hippies, hence the tie-dye shirt. But no, for real, I think that life's a journey, and we're all just figuring shit out, like it's not easy, and it's not black and white. And yeah, I feel like I've definitely just been in a season of uncertainty too, with like what's next and jobs, and I want to travel, and I just really don't know where anything is going. And I think you kind of just have to live day by day and see where things take you. But yeah, in summary, thanks for listening to this long video and hearing about my life updates. Yeah, to finish off, I'll give you guys a quick room tour. All right, thanks for listening. Bye. All right, so here's my room. There's he. Hi. Yeah, here's my door. This is a reference to Heartstopper. Then I've got some art here, which is really pretty. And I've got a ukulele and some pictures of people in my life. My university degree. Ta-da! And then we got my window and my bed. Yeah, and we've got Chapel Roan here and this little woman flower thing, which is really cute. And yeah, this is the most exciting part of the room, is my little art gallery wall. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. Boom. And then there's also some mushrooms. Woo! And that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.